Danger might be closer than you think. Before we begin, like this video, comment where and what time you're watching from, and subscribe for more chilling stories. Now turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into the unknown. Story 1. Traveling for work had never been a problem for me. I liked the road, the silence of hotels, the feeling of being temporarily out of routine. But after that night, I could never truly feel alone again. I had been driving for hours when I stopped at one of those roadside diners, the kind of place with a flickering neon sign and the lingering scent of stale coffee in the air. It was just past midnight, and the parking lot was nearly empty. I just wanted to grab a quick bite before continuing my journey. I walked in and chose a table in the corner, facing the window. The place was small, with a broken jukebox and a gleaming counter where a tired-looking waitress was drying glasses. There was only an elderly couple in one of the booths, speaking in hushed tones. I ordered a burger with fries and a strong coffee. While waiting, I picked up my phone to check my messages. That's when it vibrated with a call from an unknown number. I ignored the call and kept scrolling, assuming it was spam. But less than a minute later, my phone vibrated again. The same blocked number. I frowned. Something about the timing of the call, the silence in the restaurant, made my stomach turn. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound indifferent. For a moment, I only heard static. Then a low, precise male voice spoke. "You're eating alone. Black jacket, hair tied back, fries and a coffee." My blood ran cold. I looked around instantly, my heart hammering. But the diner was exactly as before. The waitress behind the counter, the elderly couple in their booth, no one else. My gaze swept the window, trying to see if someone was watching me from outside, but the darkness of the road only reflected my own face back at me. I shifted in my chair, swallowing hard. "Who are you?" I asked. But the call dropped before I could hear an answer. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't think of a logical explanation. No one in the restaurant seemed remotely interested in me. The waitress kept cleaning the counter, and the elderly couple continued their quiet conversation. None of them had picked up a phone. And outside, there was only darkness. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Maybe it was just a prank, someone who had seen me enter the diner and decided to mess with me. But something about the man's voice, the calculated tone, and the precision with which he described every detail made my stomach churn. I tried to act normal, eating slowly while keeping my eyes alert to my surroundings. But then, before I could finish, my phone vibrated again. The same blocked number. My chest tightened and my hand hesitated over the screen. I didn't want to answer, but I needed to know. I swallowed hard and slid my finger to pick up the call. This time, the voice came without hesitation, with an almost amused tone. "You shouldn't have ignored the first call." My mouth went dry. A chill ran up my spine as I held the phone to my ear, unable to respond. On the other end, the man's breathing was calm, almost rhythmic. "Don't worry," he continued, his voice firm but unhurried. "It's late. You have a long drive ahead of you, don't you?" My hands began to sweat. How did he know? I looked around again, trying to spot anyone holding a phone, but the waitress was now at the register, and the elderly couple seemed oblivious to everything. There was no one peeking through the window, no one close enough to overhear my conversation. I grabbed my bag from the seat beside me, ready to leave. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shakier than I would have liked. The man let out a short, almost satisfied chuckle. "Nothing. I just like keeping track of lonely travelers." My stomach twisted. Keeping track? Before I could say anything else, he whispered something that made me jump to my feet. "Drive carefully. You wouldn't want anything to happen before you reach the next stop." The line went dead. My entire body was on high alert. I grabbed my wallet, threw some bills on the table without waiting for the check, and practically ran out of the diner. The cold night air hit my face, but it did nothing to calm the panic boiling in my chest. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for my car and a truck parked further back, its cabin dark. I forced myself not to look around as I unlocked my car and got in quickly, locking the doors the moment I was inside. I sat there for a few seconds, trying to steady my breathing. "It's just someone messing with you," I murmured to myself, trying to believe it. But then, a thought hit me like a punch to the gut. I never told him I was driving. I never mentioned my destination. How did he know I had a long trip ahead? My hands trembled as I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, driving faster than necessary. But before I merged onto the road, I glanced at the rearview mirror. My blood ran cold. In the darkest corner of the parking lot, a motionless silhouette was watching me. The road stretched out ahead, a long tunnel of darkness cut only by the faint glow of my car's headlights. My hands were still shaking on the wheel as I tried to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The image of the figure in the parking lot was burned into my mind. It was hard to make out details in the dark, but I knew someone had been there. And now, the worst part, I didn't know if he had stayed behind, or if, at that very moment, he was following me. I grabbed my phone and tried to check if there was any signal, but as I had already expected, the isolated road didn't give me that option. No internet, no way to call for help. The car radio crackled between stations, and the silence was starting to feel oppressive. My only focus was the next gas station. I didn't know exactly what I would do when I got there, but I needed light, people, something that would make me feel safe. That was when I looked in the rearview mirror and felt the blood drain from my face. Back on the dark road, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. Small bright points, but steady. At first I didn't worry. It was normal for another car to be traveling late at night. But as the minutes passed, I noticed something strange. It kept the exact same distance from me. If I sped up, it sped up. If I slowed down, it did the same. My chest tightened, and a knot of fear formed in my stomach. The road was deserted with no nearby exits, and the only thing I could do was keep driving. But my instincts screamed that this wasn't a coincidence. Could it be him? The one who called me? My mind started racing with terrifying possibilities. I was alone in the middle of nowhere with an unknown car following me. And the worst part? The next gas station was still miles away. My only option was to keep driving and hope that the car would turn, take another road, anything to show that I was overreacting, but it didn't swerve. With each passing minute, my mind sank deeper into paranoia. Who was in there? Was it the man who called me? How did he know where I was? My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they hurt, and my breathing came short and fast. Then, without warning, the headlights of the car behind me flashed. Once, twice, 3 times. Like a signal. My chest went ice cold. Was he trying to communicate? Scare me? Or warn me of something worse? I pressed the accelerator, feeling my heart pounding. But before I could react in any other way, my phone vibrated on the dashboard. Blocked number. Again. My fingers hovered over the phone, hesitant. Should I answer? Ignore it? Every instinct in me screamed not to take that call. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't just pretend this wasn't happening. I took a deep breath and slid my finger across the screen, bringing the phone to my ear. Before I could even say anything, the cold and familiar voice came from the other end of the line. If I were you, I wouldn't stop at the next station. My whole body froze. My eyes widened and the car swerved slightly as my brain struggled to process it. He knew. He knew exactly where I was going. My eyes went automatically to the rearview mirror, but the headlights of the car were still there, following my every move. My stomach twisted. I didn't know what was worse. The possibility that the car behind me was his, or the idea that he could be somewhere else watching me in a way I couldn't understand. My mind spun in panic. What did he mean by that? The gas station was my only hope for safety, but now the thought of stopping there made me feel even more vulnerable. What if he was waiting for me? What if this was all a game, pushing me into a trap? My hands were so sweaty that the steering wheel slipped between my fingers. I needed to make a decision fast. Then, the car behind me did something that made my heart stop. The headlights flashed once more, and it suddenly accelerated. For a second, I thought it was going to overtake me, but instead, it just got closer, sticking to my rear bumper. Now, I was certain. He wasn't just another traveler. He was following me, and I was completely alone on the road with no one around to help. My breath caught in my throat. I was being hunted. The road ahead felt endless, a dark tunnel with no escape. My eyes darted between the rearview mirror and the road, trying to calculate some way to get away. I could try to speed up, but what if he did the same? What if he tried to force me off the road? My fingers trembled on the steering wheel, and my mind screamed at me not to panic. Then, my phone vibrated again. Blocked number. An irrational desperation took hold of me. I didn't want to answer. But at the same time, ignoring it felt even worse. Against all reason, I pressed to accept the call and brought the phone to my ear, my breathing unsteady. Before I could even speak, the man's voice came, low and almost amused. "Nice try, but I'm not the car behind you." My mind froze. A chill ran down my spine like a blade of ice. If he wasn't the car behind me, then who was? My heart pounded so hard I felt my chest tighten. My eyes flicked back to the rearview mirror, and for the first time I noticed a detail I had missed in my panic. The car behind me was an old model, large, dark-colored. The windows were too tinted for me to see who was inside. The man on the phone chuckled softly, as if amused by my desperation. "You shouldn't have ignored the first call," he murmured. "Now, you have two problems." Before I could respond, the line went dead. The only thing left was the roar of the engine as the car behind me got even closer, now flashing its headlights repeatedly. They were pressuring me. But why? Who was on the phone? Who was on the road with me? My hands were trembling so badly that I could barely hold the steering wheel. My chest rose and fell quickly, my breath short and ragged. I needed to think, needed to get out of this situation before it was too late. If the man on the phone wasn't in the car behind me, that meant there were two separate threats. But how? How had I been dragged into this? Who were these people? The car behind me suddenly sped up, almost touching my rear bumper. My eyes widened as I realized it was trying to force me off the road. The lane was narrow, with no safe shoulder, only dense forest and steep drop-offs on either side. If I lost control, I could veer off and crash. "No, no, no," I murmured to myself, desperately trying to think of a way out. That was when I saw, up ahead, a small U-turn. A chance. I had to act fast. With a burst of pure adrenaline, I grabbed the wheel and swerved sharply to the right into the turn. The tires screeched on the asphalt, and for a second I thought I would lose control. The car skidded, the back end fishtailed dangerously, but I managed to steady it. In the rear-view mirror, I saw the car that had been chasing me shoot past, unable to make the turn in time. It disappeared into the darkness, unable to follow me. My heart pounded against my ribs, and for a moment, I thought I had escaped. But then my phone vibrated again. Blocked number. With my hand still trembling, I answered. Before I could say anything, the voice came again, calm, as if nothing had happened. "Nice move. But where do you think you're going now?" My stomach dropped. My eyes darted to the road ahead, and my blood turned to ice. On the roadside, under the dim glow of a lone streetlight, a figure stood, motionless, watching, and even in the darkness I knew. He was smiling. My entire body locked up. The man was there, standing at the edge of the road, exactly as if he had known I would come, as if he had predicted my every move. My fingers tightened on the wheel, my mind spinning in terror. This wasn't possible. He had been on the phone, he had known about the car following me, he knew where I was now. But how? My only option was to keep driving. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, not caring if he tried to block me or not. As I passed him, my eyes instinctively flicked to the rearview mirror, and then my blood ran cold. He didn't turn to follow me with his eyes. He was already looking directly at me, as if he had been waiting for me the whole time. The road stretched on, and I kept driving non-stop until I reached a town, never looking back. To this day, I never found out who the man on the phone was, or how he knew so much about me. Story 2. I have always been a pragmatic man. I don't believe in supernatural things, and I'm not the type to get scared easily. So when I moved into a more secluded house in a quiet neighborhood, the last thing I was worried about was security. But at my wife's insistence, I installed cameras around the property. One at the garage entrance, another in the backyard, and a final one on the porch, aimed at the front door. I did everything myself, tested the angles, connected them to the phone app, and went to bed satisfied with the job. The next morning, before leaving for work, I decided to review the recordings, just to make sure everything was working. I sat on the couch, opened the app, and started fast-forwarding through the footage. Nothing unusual for the first few hours. Some cars passing on the street, a cat crossing the yard. But then, when I reached 3:12 a.m., I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the middle of my driveway, illuminated only by the faint glow of the night vision camera, stood two children, small, standing side by side, staring directly at the house. The monochrome glow of the footage made their faces look even paler, their eyes dark and without reflection. My stomach twisted. I didn't have children, and none of my nearby neighbors had kids that age. I slowed down the video and watched more closely. The children didn't move. They just stood there, motionless, staring at the house for minutes on end. Then, without warning, they began walking slowly toward the front door. My heart pounded as I watched. They didn't run, they didn't hesitate. They just walked in an eerily methodical rhythm. It seemed wrong. My breath caught in my throat. I fast-forwarded the video a little more, feeling a chill run down my spine. The children stopped right in front of my door, so close that the porch camera captured their faces more clearly. But there was something off. Their expressions were empty, completely devoid of emotion. They didn't knock on the door, didn't try to get in. They just stood there, as if they were waiting. Then, out of nowhere, they disappeared. They didn't step back, they didn't run away. In one frame, they were there. In the next, they were gone. My chest tightened. I rewound the video, watched it in slow motion, frame by frame. But the result was the same. They simply vanished, as if they had never been there. The timestamp on the screen read exactly 3:12 a.m. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. I reviewed the video several times, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe a recording glitch, a transmission error, but it didn't make sense. Everything around the children remained normal. The wind swayed the trees, the porch light flickered subtly as it always did. Only they disappeared. My stomach churned at the thought that at some point during the night something, or someone, had been standing right in front of my house watching me while I slept. I decided to check the area around the house. I stepped onto the porch, trying to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The cold morning air felt heavier. I looked toward the driveway, then the yard. Nothing. But as I descended the porch steps and reached the front door, my blood ran cold. On the concrete of the porch, right in front of my door, were marks. 2 small footprints, side by side, imprinted in the night's dew. I froze. The footprints were too small to belong to an adult, and there were no other marks indicating that someone had approached or walked away. Just those 2, perfectly aligned, as if the children from the video were still there, waiting. My chest tightened. I was alone out there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to be. I swallowed hard and tried to rationalize. Maybe it was just a strange phenomenon caused by the dew, an illusion from the damp ground. But when I stepped back inside, closed the door, and locked the bolts, something inside me told me it wasn't that simple. Still breathing heavily, I sat on the couch and went back to the video, now focusing on the seconds after the children disappeared. That's when I saw something that made me lose my breath. The porch camera captured a slight movement on the door, as if someone had tried to turn the doorknob. My skin prickled as I watched. I rewound the footage, watching frame by frame. There was no doubt. At the exact moment the children vanished, the doorknob turned, as if something or someone was trying to get inside. But what disturbed me the most was the most obvious detail. There was no visible hand, no shadow, no movement near the door except for the subtle turn of the knob itself. It was as if their presence was still there, even if the cameras couldn't see them. I stood up from the couch, uneasy. I walked to the front door and stopped in front of it, trying to ignore the memory of the video. The doorknob looked normal now. No sign that anything had touched it. No marks, no scratches. But the feeling that I wasn't alone in that house started to settle in unbearably. I took a deep breath and pressed my ear against the door, as if expecting to hear something on the other side. And then, as if the universe itself was playing with me, my phone vibrated on the table. My heart jumped. I turned quickly to the table where the phone was vibrating again. I picked it up with sweaty hands and looked at the screen. Unknown number. My stomach twisted. Something inside me screamed not to answer, but my finger automatically slid to the green button. Hello? My voice came out tense, almost a whisper. For a few seconds, all I heard was static. Then a low, muffled sound, like breathing. The silence on the other end of the line was almost scarier than anything they could have said. I was about to hang up when suddenly a child's voice murmured something from the other side. Open the door. My blood ran cold. My knees went weak and I almost dropped the phone. The worst part? The voice didn't sound like it came from a phone. It sounded close. My entire body froze. My eyes went automatically to the door, as if I expected to see something on the other side. But there was nothing. The silence in the house felt denser, heavier. "Who's there?" My voice came out lower than I intended, but the call had already ended. The phone now showed only the home screen, as if nothing had happened. My chest rose and fell rapidly, and an irrational fear took hold of me. With trembling hands, I returned to the living room and grabbed the camera system's remote. I opened the live feed from the porch, hoping to see anything. A shadow, movement, a sign that this was just a cruel prank. But the screen showed only my empty front entrance, illuminated by the yellowish glow of the streetlight. No children, no shadows. Yet as I watched, I noticed a detail that made my breath catch. The doorknob was slightly turned, as if someone had just let go of it. My chest tightened. I knew I had locked the door. I clearly remembered turning the key and hearing the metallic click before stepping away. But there was the proof, right in front of my eyes. Someone, or something, had touched the doorknob. I swallowed hard and rewound the camera footage once more, searching for any sign of movement before that moment. But there was nothing. No approach, no shadow. The doorknob had simply moved on its own. I stepped away from the screen and looked around the room, feeling sweat trickle down my back. The house was silent, but the kind of silence that doesn't bring relief, only the sense of a presence. I needed to get out of there. I grabbed my keys and went straight to the door, unlocking it in a rush. When I opened it, the empty street stretched before me. Nothing but the wind lightly rustling the leaves on the sidewalk. But then a detail made me stop. Outside the door, right in the middle of the doormat, there was something that hadn't been there before. A single small, damp footprint, as if a barefoot child had just stood there moments ago. My heart pounded. The footprint was there, clear on the mat, but the sidewalk around it was dry. There were no other marks leading up to it, no trail of dirt. It was as if that small footprint had appeared out of nowhere, placed exactly where I would find it. A shiver ran down my spine. I looked toward the street, toward the dark corners of the quiet neighborhood, expecting to see something, but everything seemed normal, too normal. I slowly stepped back inside and locked the door firmly, turning the key multiple times as if that could keep away whatever was out there. I turned to look at the living room, trying to catch my breath. That was when the phone vibrated again. My hands were sweaty as I picked up the device and looked at the screen. Unknown number. I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering courage, and answered. Before I could speak, the child's voice whispered from the other end of the line. "Why did you lock the door?" My vision blurred for a second. The air felt heavier, suffocating. The voice was soft, almost playful, but there was something wrong with it. Something that made my stomach churn. My entire body broke out in goosebumps. With a trembling hand, I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at the screen. The call was still active. The breathing on the other end was slow, controlled, as if whoever was speaking knew exactly what effect their words had on me. "Who are you?" I whispered, my own voice barely audible. The silence stretched on. Then the sound of what seemed like children's laughter, but it was wrong, too distant, like an echo coming from somewhere deep. My heart pounded as the voice spoke again, now lower, almost menacing. "We just wanted to come in." The call dropped. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. My chest rose and fell rapidly, fear bubbling inside me. Every instinct in me screamed to get out of that house. I picked up my phone from the floor and, with shaking hands, opened the camera app again. I needed to see if there was anything outside. The porch camera feed appeared on the screen, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. But then, something changed. The streetlight flickered for a brief second, and when it stabilized, my heart stopped. The children were back. They were there, standing in front of the door, exactly where the solitary footprint had appeared minutes before. The same rigid posture, the same empty faces, but there was something worse now. They were closer. Before I could react, one of them slowly tilted her head to the side as if studying me. And then, at that exact moment, they both looked directly at the camera, as if they knew I was watching, as if they had been waiting for me to do so. My blood ran cold. They knew. They knew I was looking. My finger trembled over the phone screen, but I couldn't look away. The children remained there, motionless, staring directly at the camera, as if they could see me from the other side. Then, without warning, the screen went black. The camera feed cut out suddenly, leaving only my pale reflection staring back at me on the phone. A sob caught in my throat as I ran to the locked door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. No sound. No laughter. But I knew they were still there. I stood there for endless minutes, my heart hammering. When I finally gathered the courage to look through the living room window, there was nothing on the porch anymore. No footprints. No sign that anyone had been there. But I knew the truth. And the worst part? That night at 3:12 a.m. my phone vibrated again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Since then, every night at exactly the same time, the phone rings. I have never answered again, and I have never checked the cameras after midnight. But deep down I know. They are still there. Waiting. Story 3. When we found that house, it felt like a dream. My wife, Mariana, and I had been searching for months for the perfect place to start over. And that quiet neighborhood, with tree-lined streets and a spacious garden, was exactly what we wanted. The price seemed too good to be true, but the realtor assured us it was only because the previous owners had to move out in a hurry. We didn't ask too many questions. In the end, all that mattered was that we finally had a home. The first few days were hectic, with boxes scattered around the living room and moving trucks going up and down the street. It was only later that we started noticing the strange details. Letters began arriving, all addressed to a name we didn't recognize, Antonio Noguera. At first we didn't pay much attention, probably a former resident who forgot to update his address. But when we mentioned it to the neighbors, their expressions changed. The man in the house next door just muttered something and shut the door without answering. The woman at the end of the street looked at us with a mix of pity and fear before saying quietly, "If I were you, I'd give that house back." That unsettled me. What did they mean by give the house back? I tried to ignore it, convincing myself the neighbors were just reserved, but Mariana seemed uneasy. "Why doesn't anyone want to talk about the previous owner?" she asked, shuffling through the stack of letters on the table. I had no answer. I decided to look for information on my own, but I couldn't find anything about an Antonio Noguera in the recent records of the house. It was as if he had never lived there. Days passed and strange things started happening. One night we heard footsteps coming from the hallway while we were in the living room, but when we looked, there was nothing there. On another occasion, I woke up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone was standing beside the bed, watching me. When I turned on the light, the room was empty, but the air felt off, colder, heavier. Mariana started avoiding being alone in the house. "There's something wrong here," she murmured one night. "I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like this house didn't want us to come in." The next morning, while we were having coffee, someone knocked on the door. The sound was firm but hesitant. When I opened it, I found a thin man with sunken eyes and a frightened expression. He looked uncertain, as if he had wrestled with himself before coming here. "Sorry to bother you," he began in a low voice, "but I used to live here." My throat went dry. It was him, Antonio Noguera. Before I could say anything, he looked at the door and asked, "Did you change the locks?" Mariana, now standing beside me, nodded slowly. "Yes, we changed them as soon as we moved in." The man let out a relieved sigh, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. But instead of saying something like, "Great, that's what I needed to know," he murmured something that made my blood turn to ice. "Well, then maybe he won't be able to get in this time." The silence after that sentence was unbearable. My chest tightened, and I saw Mariana gripping the hem of her shirt, nervous. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to stay calm but feeling fear spread through my stomach. Antonio glanced over his shoulder, as if making sure no one was listening. Then he lowered his voice. "I need to come inside," he said. "I need to see if he's still here." I exchanged a quick look with Mariana. Every rational part of my brain screamed not to let this man step into our house. But at the same time, there was something about him, the genuine fear in his eyes, that made me hesitate. Reluctantly, I pushed the door open to make room. Antonio stepped in slowly, as if each step inside the house was a test, as if he was expecting something to stop him from continuing. He looked around with a somber expression and then murmured something that sent chills down my spine. "It's happened before," But this time, you changed the locks. That might change everything. Antonio walked slowly through the living room, his eyes scanning every corner, as if searching for something invisible. He stopped at the entrance to the hallway and stood there for a moment, motionless, taking a deep breath. "He likes to stay here," he murmured. Mariana shot me an alarmed look, and I swallowed hard. "Who?" I asked, trying not to let my voice shake. The man slowly turned his head toward me. "I don't know his name, maybe he never had one, but he always comes back." My body went cold. "Comes back from where?" I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Antonio closed his eyes for a moment as if searching for courage and whispered, "From the inside." The silence that followed was suffocating. Mariana gripped my arm and I felt the tension in her body. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "From the inside of where?" Antonio took a deep breath, clenching his hands as if trying to control a tremor. He looked around again, as if expecting to see something move, something we hadn't yet noticed. "This house," he began in a low voice, "is not empty. It never was. When I lived here, he appeared every night. Sometimes he just watched me. Other times he tried to come closer." He pointed toward the hallway and a chill ran down my spine. "He always stood there first, in the corner, in the dark, waiting." Mariana tightened her grip on my arm. "And why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you call the police?" Antonio let out a weak, humorless laugh. "Do you think the police could help? I tried everything. I had the house blessed, I slept with all the lights on, I even thought about running away. But he always came back. I changed the locks once, just like you did, and for a while I thought it worked. But then, one night, I heard the door open. My legs felt weak." Mariana let out a short gasp, as if the air had been knocked from her chest. "The door opened?" I repeated, my voice lower than I wanted. Antonio nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the hallway as if he could still see it happening. "I was sure it was locked. I checked before going to bed, but at 3 in the morning I heard the click of the lock. Then, the footsteps. My entire body shivered." Antonio continued, as if trapped in the memory. "They were slow, dragging footsteps. I locked myself in the bedroom and stood there, holding my breath. Then, the doorknob to my room started turning. But it stopped, like something had realized I was awake. And then the footsteps faded away. The next morning, the front door was open again. That was when I decided to leave." He looked at us for the first time since he started telling his story. "But now, you changed the locks. That might change things." I remained silent, processing what Antonio had just said. Every word he spoke seemed to carry more weight, and I didn't know what to do with it. I looked at Mariana, who seemed as frozen as I was, and tried to find some rational explanation for what was happening. But no matter how hard I tried, I knew there was no denying the gravity of the situation. Something was wrong with that house, and something was still there. Antonio finally broke the silence. "The worst part is that even after everything, I knew he was never going to let me go." He stepped toward the window and looked outside, as if expecting to see something moving in the street. "You can lock the door, change the locks, but when he decides he's coming in..." He paused, his gaze distant, as if reliving the worst moment of his life. "He always gets in." Mariana looked at me and I saw the fear in her eyes. I wanted to believe this was all a lie, a made-up story. But there was something in Antonio's eyes, a pain so real, that made me believe he knew exactly what he was talking about. The silence inside the house felt heavy, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Antonio, still staring out the window, seemed more distant with every passing second. "He will try to get in again," he said suddenly, his voice lower. "And this time, he knows you're here. He knows you changed the locks." Mariana took a step back, as if trying to process what he had just said. But Antonio's words kept echoing in my mind. I didn't want to believe it, but something in my intuition told me he was telling the truth. "He's already inside," Antonio said, more to himself than to us. The room grew even quieter and the air felt heavier, harder to breathe. I looked toward the hallway, my eyes fixed on the door. Every creak of the house, every shifting shadow made me wonder if he was there, if he had already entered. My chest tightened. "What should we do?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Antonio looked at me with an expression that was a mix of fear and resignation. "Nothing, just wait. And when he appears, He turned his gaze to the front door, locked the doors tightly, and never looked into his eyes. I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of Antonio's words. He spoke as if he had been through this countless times before. And the worst part? He seemed to be preparing us for something we knew was coming but couldn't stop. The fear was tangible, almost as if it were lurking in every corner of the house, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The clock on the wall seemed to amplify the tension, each tick-tick echoing like an imminent warning. Then, as if obeying some invisible command, the front door handle began to turn slowly. The sound of the metal shifting was enough to make me swallow hard. Mariana looked at me, her eyes filled with terror. Antonio didn't move, only watched with a resignation that felt more like a warning. The door opened slightly, and a dark shadow cast itself inside. But before I could react, Antonio moved quickly, slamming the door shut. "Don't look at him," he shouted, gripping the handle tightly. The shadow stood still, as if waiting for something. And then, silence once again consumed the house.